Hello and welcome to another episode of the Emerging Purpose Podcast with me, Greg Donaldson. Hope you're all doing okay out there. It's been a little while since the last podcast, and this week I'm very excited to announce that my guest on the podcast is Carr Gomm. Now, if you haven't heard of Philip, where have you been, first of all? But if you haven't heard of him, let me tell you a little bit about him. So he was the chief druid for many years, and he was asked to lead the Order of Bards and Ovates and Druids. And he sort of handed that over in 2020, so he did that for about 32 years. But he's not just a druid, and he wasn't just a druid. He has been many things, and I first actually came across Carr Gomm when I bought a tarot pack called the Animal Druid Pack, and so I was very excited in 2018-19 to be asked by Ros Watts of the ACE integration program. I think at that point we were calling it the connectedness program with the synthesis program, and basically I got to work alongside Philip for this program, which was about psychedelic integration for participants of clinical trials who've been using psilocybin for the relief of depression. And so I was lucky enough to go away and have a sort of team meeting and go to Gomm up in Wales and meet Philip and have some very interesting conversations with him. And I was so glad that he agreed to come on the podcast because there's just so many things I wanted to ask him about. So he was a druid for a long time, but I suppose many people probably know him more because of his books and his writings. And we did talk about his actual latest book, which is not quite available yet, but it will be available soon, called The Gift of the Night. And that's his book on sleep and sleep as a spiritual practice. But he's written so many books. I mean, I will put a link to his website and you can have a look for yourself. But, you know, he's written on many issues and topics. You know, I'll name a few here. The Winged Psyche, The Prophecies was one of his actual novel that he wrote. Lessons in Magic, The Druid Mysteries. He's done a few different versions of the Druid Animal Oracle. He's done the Druid Plant Oracle, the Druid Craft Tarot, Journeys of the Soul, the Druid Way. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So there's definitely something for everyone in that list. He's also a trained therapist. He trained with the Psychosynthesis Institute. So again, we had a little bit of a crossover there, as I'm a psychosynthesis psychotherapist myself. I trained at the Trust. It's kind of nice to have that crossover. And he's also, I guess you would call it a sophrologist, or he practices sophrology, which is another interesting map and model, I guess. And you can find out more about that on his website too. But I suppose in this conversation, the things that we covered were, you know, we went into a little bit of stuff about tarot. We went into stuff about purpose and meaning. And we talked about his book on sleep. And we just generally had a really nice conversation. And it's always really great to connect with Philip. He's just such a lovely man, lovely open being, and very generous with his knowledge. And so I think what I'll do is we'll just get straight on with the podcast, and please let me welcome you to this conversation with myself and Carr Gomm. Are you watching any? Do you watch TV?
Yeah.
What are you into at the moment?
Oh God, I saw a fantastic film 2 days ago, and I've forgotten the name of it. It's really worth watching. It breaks the fourth wall. It's got with a nun and about a girl who lives on no food in Ireland, and a nurse is sent out, and it's just a stunning film actually, because it starts off the film, and it's a period drama in Ireland.
Is this in the cinemas at the moment, or is it something you just on?
It is in the cinemas. Yes, it's on Curzon, so they tend to have ones.
Yeah.
And it's a period drama. You see the trailer, and it's a period drama, but it starts off in a warehouse with the film set, and the director sort of says something like, "We all need stories, and you just have to, and it moves to part of the thing, and then suddenly you're in the film, and you're totally in it for about an hour and 10 minutes, and then that voice comes back saying, 'Remember, we need stories,' or something like that."
Ooh.
And then just at the very end, the camera, the climactic finishing scene, and then there's a camera pans like that, and you're in the warehouse, and there's the actress who's just staring at you, going in, out, because there's a sort of two reality. You've been in, out. It's just fantastic.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
You'll have to text me and let me know what.
Yeah,
the
I'll
name
text
of that
you.
is.
We'll tell you what it is.
Yeah.
And
I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So thanks for coming to talk to me.
Pleasure.
We met a few years back, right, when we were still doing a bit of work for this. For Ros Watts with Synthesis. This
connectedness program.
Connectedness program. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember meeting you back then and kind of really, really feeling like, oh wow, I've kind of met one of my heroes. So to I'm just only because what I'd been really interested in, actually the way that I'd come to know you is through your tarot.
Okay.
Yeah. So you've got a kind of tarot pack, right? That you designed with your wife Stephanie.
And well, the imagery comes from Will Worthington. I mean, Stephanie and I worked on what we wanted in the images. Yeah. And then Will did the artwork for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship with the tarot?
Okay. Well, the tarot was something that, when we were teenagers, was a big thing. There was this sort of renaissance in interest in the tarot around the time of flower power and the psychedelic renaissance and all of that. Was around in the sort of, we're talking about the 70s really.
Yeah.
And so I was in it from an early age, and I remember I have a very vivid memory of being in an unknown flat in Notting Hill Gate. The way in those days you'd end up in funny places and you weren't quite sure how you got there, sort of thing. With about 20 people in the room and everybody, and everybody as high as kites, and this guy was a sort of, he was literally throwing tarot cards around and talking about them as he flung them around the room. It's very peculiar. Yeah. But it sort of worked in the particular situation.
So what he was kind of giving readings as he was throwing them?
Yeah, it was as if I'd be sitting opposite from you now. Yeah. I'd just flick a card at you and say, the hangman, that's, you're about to go through something interesting, aren't you? Sort of, like that. And so it was
sort of like a sort of anarchist tarot reading.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like, anarchist. And then I used it, I suppose, for about 5 years, perhaps, maybe a bit longer. And then I had a period where I didn't look at it at all, really. And then the publisher of our Druid Animal Oracle invited us to do a tarot deck. And my initial reaction was to say no, because I'm not an expert in it. Yeah. But I've sort of learnt with decisions to wait 3 days. It's a very good little rule. If you don't have to make an instant decision, and it's an important question, just sit on it for 3 days. So I sat on it, waited, and the obvious came into my awareness during those 3 days, which is the value of beginner's mind.
Well, I was just about to say to you, I mean, I think there's something about if you'd answered that question straight away because you weren't an expert, how many things would you not do in your life? What would one not do in their lives?
Totally.
If you didn't think you're an expert, I mean, God.
My entire life, probably. That's right. Virtually everything I've done, I haven't been an expert in it, you know.
Hooray.
Yeah, you know, because in a way, that's how you become an expert, by trying, you know, by coming in with beginner's mind. And there's a huge value in beginner's mind, you know. And I thought, what if I approach tarot with beginner's mind, which of course isn't beginner's mind, I suppose. In other words, what if I approach tarot with my understanding of psychology, my experience with psychosynthesis, you know, with druidry, with, you know, a whole bunch of different sort of perspectives, and just look at tarot. And so I contacted the publisher and said, yeah, okay, we'll do it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, when I was training to be a psychotherapist, as a psychosynthesis psychotherapist, my tutor, who I've actually interviewed for this podcast as well, Alan Frater, had your pack of tarot cards.
Oh, right.
And he was in one of the weekends that we were learning, and he was just kind of doing what your anarchistic tarot reader was doing. He was sort of saying, you know, just take a card. And actually we weren't given an interpretation. We were asked to come up with our own interpretations.
Okay, yeah.
So to just sit with the card and just feel into it, look at the imagery and see what that might resonate for us with in our lives, you know. And that's...
Well, that's I mean, I think particularly the tarot, because there are so many images and because it has such a long sort of tradition of knowledge and teaching around it and so on, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that you have to be an expert and there's a whole load of stuff you need to know. But for me, a big turning point was when we had when our daughter Sophie was 16, and she had her friend, a 16-year-old friend, living with us at the time from Kenya, and they were doing their GCSEs. And Sophie said to me, you know, Dee wants to have a tarot reading. And I said, oh, no, not a good idea, you know. And she said, no, go, come on. I said, well, you know, it's like, I don't know how her parents would feel about that. And, you know, and in the end, they managed to twist my arm. And I did it. And I was just praying that she didn't get a difficult card, like the Nine of Swords or Death, for instance.
Oh, yeah, because some can be kind of
some
quite
can be
dramatic.
quite dramatic and tricky, you know, and conventional interpretations, or, you know, traditional interpretations can be quite problematic. And lo and behold, she selected. Well, my sense was I was just starting to work with the idea of not using spreads. You know, spreads are predetermined patterns that you lay the cards down. So I had just had this idea that one could work in a more intuitive way. So I said to her, just choose some cards. And this is what I do with most people now if they ask me, just choose some cards. And then often the person will say, well, how many? And you just do the enigmatic psychotherapist smile and sort of slight shrug of the shoulders. You know, so you know, yes, that's right. So, you know, and then so people pick a number of cards. You say, just lay them face down, shuffle the deck, and then, you know, tune in, lay them face down. And then when you've done that, just turn them all up, look at them, and then just imagine they're pictures in a storybook perhaps about the particular issue you've asked about or about your life, you see, and just talk.
Nice.
And I did that, and of course she had Death, and she had the Nine of Swords. And the Nine of Swords is the sort of dark night of the soul. It's in R1, it's 9 swords on a wall, and then a person sitting up in the middle of the night looking distressed, crying.
Yes.
You know, so they're all, you know, again, if you use those little books of interpretations you get in sort of traditional decks, you'll see it says, you know, they're tricky. So she looked at them all, and then just a smile came upon her face, and she picked up the Nine of Swords, and she said, well, this is me, of course. You know, I've got 9 GCSEs, and I'm worried, you know, but soon that will be in the past, and they will all hang as trophies on my wall.
Oh my gosh!
You know,
that's such a brilliant interpretation.
Isn't it lovely?
Yeah.
And then she picked up the Death card, another smile, and she said, well, of course, this does mark a death in a way. This is the death of my childhood. I mean, I'm no longer... I mean, she absolutely got it. It was utterly extraordinary. And so that taught me a great deal. And so I became very, very excited by that. And over the next 6 months, any poor person who happened to walk through our doors was captured and
Thrown a card.
offered a reading. And what I found is that 95% of people do completely their own readings.
Yeah.
You just set up the context and the framework, and they do all the work. And then just occasionally they will say something like, "This doesn't. I don't get anything from this, so I don't know what that means." And that's where you come in as saying, "Well, traditionally it means, one of the interpretations is."
So you could kind of prod with something you
prompt
might know.
and prompt,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
occasionally, for instance, I would find that just literally moving a card. Once that provoked somebody to burst into tears. Just saying, how do you feel if I move this card over here?
So the
like
positioning.
that? Yes. That was around her mother and her stepfather. And in the spread, in the way she'd spread them out, he was over there, and I put them together. And she had this insight, and she started to cry, and she said, actually, they do belong together.
Wow.
But I've tried to keep them apart.
Wow. So it was even in the positioning was just
Even
such
the positioning of the cards.
There's so many things about what you've said already that I'm making kind of, mental notes. But, the first thing that I kind of picked up on was this idea about being a psychotherapist and actually the kind of temptation to leap into interpretation. All right, and actually, what you've said there is kind of brilliant advice for any therapist as well, isn't it? Is to kind of actually, well, let's see what this unknown moment brings, rather than me having to be an expert or be clever and kind of offer you this clever interpretation of what's going on in your life, which kind of weirdly a lot of clients seem to be wanting, but we can fall into offering
providing that. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing that you're just saying there is just reminds me also of this sort of positioning is something about family constellations, right? And there's something in there that's quite family constellations being the kind of method or model that people use to kind of look at family trauma or trauma coming down through family lines. Yeah.
And the actual that really mysterious process in constellation work of how the physical positioning seems to play a major part in it. And I became very aware of that. And I don't know if you've ever done constellation work with objects. There are some people do it with sort of wooden blocks, and you just move the blocks around a board, and even that can be really helpful. It's about, I guess, patterns and understanding patterns and so on. But a really striking example of that was I was questioning. It would be natural to say, well, look, you've got 72 evocative images, so leave aside all the mumbo jumbo, and why not just say any combination of these evocative is going to evoke material from a client, and that's fine. But there's nothing.
As if you're looking 72 different types of mirrors.
Yes.
Yeah.
That there's nothing mysterious or magical about this. It can be totally random. That you don't have to evoke any sort of ideas of spirituality and all the rest of it. So, but then you'll get certain readings that occur that are so striking that you say, well, this isn't random. And to give you an example, somebody came over from the other side of the world who had a particular issue she wanted to look at. And I invited her to spread the cards. It's where you you shuffle them, and then you lay them out in a long line, and then you just pick them one by one like that. So it's not like when you shuffle them into a pack, you can have instances, particularly if you've got a new deck or a fairly new deck, of where there's a cluster. So all the pentacles are together, for instance, or But if you shuffle them and lay them out, and then you pick them like randomly or specifically or intuitively like that, that's not going to be the case. Her issue was around a family holiday that she was going to attend, and these family holidays always went wrong. and ended in tears.
Oh dear.
And she was about to have one of these, and she wanted to make sure it didn't end in tears, you see. So she picked these cards. Every single card was one suit. I think it was cups. King of Cups, Queen of Cups, Princess of Cups. And then there was one Queen of Wands, or Princess of Wands. And she picked all those, and they all represented the members of her family. And she started saying, "Oh my God, he even looks like that in the image,"
Brilliant.
and so had each one she could identify, and she was the odd one out, with precisely the characteristic of that card.
Uh-huh.
So it happened.
Yeah.
Wands, fiery, and all this
Right.
stuff.
Okay.
So that was significant. But the remarkable thing was there's a thing called the rogue card or the wild card, which can often happen when you're shuffling, where one just bounces out,
Yes.
flies out.
Yeah, you have to take notice of that
You've
card.
really got to take
Yeah,
notice
yeah.
and grab it. And that's exactly what happened when she was doing it. One shot out, and I caught it
Yeah.
and put it down like that. And so then after she'd said, "Oh gosh, we're all here. This is the family holiday. There's my mum. There's dad. All of us are here, and there's me. And I'm different. And then I said, well, let's have a look at this one. I turned to him. She said, "Oh my God, there's my brother who's flying in 2 days into the."
Of course.
Of course, So in terms of, for me, that answered that question, or it affirmed for me that something much more than chance is going on because of the way it was picked and all the rest of it. Then the other question that I'd often sort of thought about was, what's the point of this really? I mean, is this really of any great help doing these kinds of things? Do you get like a bit of insight, or but is it But she, on her way back, she had the holiday abroad and then came back via London.
Yeah.
And popped in, and I asked her what happened, and I said, was it in any way helpful, really, if we're going to be hard-nosed about this?
Nice.
And she said, totally, because of what I learned in that reading, I basically made the resolve to, at a certain point in the evening, to go to bed. Not to have that extra glass of wine and to get into an argy-bargy and for it all to go pear-shaped, but just check out when I've. So a little, she'd got that insight in the reading that's what
Brilliant.
she should do. She did it, and for the first time they had a really
They kind of got on
and had a good time.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a really interesting question to ask about tarot, because ultimately, you're right. They're just pieces of paper with pictures on them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of go, oh yeah, mumbo jumbo, whatever. But what I'm really interested in, and I mean, sometimes I actually do pull a tarot card from my clients at the end of their session. If they're that way inclined, I like to offer that, and it's a kind of nice way to sort of ground the session usually. I find. But also, the question around whether this works or not, I think there's something about well, maybe with a lot of things in life, is this kind of moderation. So I remember when I first got into tarot, I kind of almost overused it.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah,
It was
absolutely.
like, should I see this person? Do it? What should I go on this holiday? Where should I go out? What's happening on Saturday? Like kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's
the
just
I Ching is good for that as well. It's where when you start using the I Ching and then
Right.
you use it for everything. Yeah, that's
so
right.
like every decision kind of gets
Yeah.
kind of you consult the oracle.
Yeah, that's right.
So so after a while I realised this was oracle abuse.
Yes.
So actually you have to be careful.
Yeah,
and kind of
totally. Yeah.
stand back and sparingly, so it doesn't become this kind of
Yeah,
thing that you're leading your life through the cards.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting thinking about talking to you because you're so prolific in your output. You know, and I remember sort of, well, we spent a few days in Cayman, right, a few years ago, and I remember driving up and back with you, and sort of getting to hear about some of the things that books that you'd written, and the things that you're interested in, and you know, so it's kind of difficult to know where to come in and focus. I suppose what might be, I mean, the purpose of this podcast is kind of emerging purpose, which is a kind of umbrella for motivation and creativity and eros and passion and all those kind of things. So I suppose the obvious question is, where do you find your motivation? Because you've produced so much, you know.
Well,
I mean, it's a big question. So,
yeah, I know. No, I mean, when I was 11, it all started when I was 11 for me. That's the sort of starting point. I can't remember much before I was 11. I have little flashes of memories of childhood and so on, you know. But when I was 11, I read a book called The Life of the Buddha by L. Adams Beck, and it was a very florid, lyrical, sort of lyrically written book, and it turned me on. It switched on the lights, and I thought, this is the most important thing to do, gaining enlightenment. This is the ultimate task. At the same time, I met my first sort of spiritual teacher, was the old chief druid Ross Nichols. He was a friend of my father's, and he sort of came and saw us, and I said hello to him. And then when I was 16, I started to train with him. So spirituality, or sort of the philosophical quest, the quest for wisdom and clarity and illumination, have been sort of central to me. From that moment onwards.
And that comes through in, you know, just looking at your sort of reading your output of
the books.
Yeah, that comes through, that kind of spiritual druidry, sophrology,
even the nakedness book,
right?
The history of nakedness. I mean, a third of it is about nakedness and spirituality. So yes, and the novel that I've written is about spirituality too. So that's at the core. So there's, despite the disparate nature of the books that I've written and the things that I've done, they're all at their heart. It's that simple sort of quest for illumination, and the spiritual quest, or however one wants to term it.
Yeah. So this quest for illumination, I mean, that's young as well, right? 11 to kind of, I mean, I remember when I was 11, I think I joined the church choir because I kind of fancied the vicar's daughter.
Yes.
But and got confirmed, you know.
Yes, that's right.
and then sort of realised that, oh, I'm not really getting my
money's worth. Yeah.
Money's worth here. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I've got to pull some bells every now and then, and sort of drink a little bit of wine. But you know, and I suppose that's the other question I have in terms of, you know, how do you how do you see the difference between religion and spirituality? I mean, it's quite another big question, but it's you know, I think it's quite an interesting one.
Sure. Well, of course, the immediate question that arises when if you say, okay, this kind of spiritual quest, or this sort of identification and ambition at another level as well, around spirituality and whatever that means, or the spiritual quest, there's then a question of, okay, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
You know, you get the idea that illumination is the thing. What are you going to do about it? And, you know, so I remember I tried meditating.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so from the age of 11, I was buying joss sticks and sort of staring at the little point, and then that kind of wasn't working. Then you stare at a candle, and that doesn't work. And then try and read a book about it, and try this and try that.
Like, as if you're going to get to this, like this thing's going to happen if you stare at this thing long enough.
Yeah, yes, because if you read, you know, there's, you know, concentration is one of the ways of, you know, meditation. So the idea is you concentrate on a candle flame, or you concentrate on, you know, perfume or whatever. so the technology, the question of, well, how am I going to get there, becomes the issue, you know. So I was, you know, because I was around in the 70s, and everybody was smoking pot. So I smoked pot, you know, and it's like, oh, maybe I can get here with this. And then, you know, the results are inconclusive. Let's try again. You know,
let's keep trying.
Let's keep trying, you know, and so on. And in a way, I've been in this experimental phase for about 50 years or something, you know, of trying lots of different. I've tried so many methods, you know, and you know, with varying success, and of course each one has its value and has things to teach you and all the rest of it. And I think the mistake we can make on this path, if you like, is that we'll get somewhere.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And so you think that, you know, if I can make it to the top of the mountain, then I can just for the rest of my life. I'll be sort of totally zened and sort of chilled and illumined and
my personality won't bother me anymore.
Yes, I'll just be all knowing and all wise and everything be marvelous. And it sort of doesn't work like that. And it's like because I sometimes ask myself, why are you still talking about this stuff, you know, and why are you writing about it, and why are you reading about it, and, you know, doing workshops on it and so on. I mean, like, haven't you learnt enough by now? I mean, don't you, you know, do you still care? You know, it's like, well, how come? And the answer is yes, because it's like all sorts of human activities, like, say, physical fitness.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you don't just suddenly stop running because you've sort of achieved optimum health, and then you can sort of blob about for the rest of your life. You keep running, you know, and
although that is the case in
with
in
you,
my
in
case,
your case,
with running.
Yes.
3 marathons and it was all over.
You're done. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. But there's it's such a brilliant point, because it's kind of almost like the illusion, isn't it? It's the trap of that you know, let's just put a carrot of enlightenment out here, and we'll just chase that, and actually the effect that has on one's system is like, I am not enough, and there's something out there that I will find
one day, when I'll be sorted. One day I'll get sorted, and then I can relax. But until then, yes, I'm not enough. And I'm inadequate, and I can't feel good about myself. And
And you know, there's something I want to come on to, because I know also that you trained in yoga nidra, of course. Another non-expert in that, maybe.
Yes, exactly. yes, that's right.
but yeah, no. Coming back to this thing about religion. So I wonder if religion, if what you're saying is that religion was a kind of attempt at, or the sort of dogmatic approach to religion is one of those attempts to lock it down.
Well, I think, you know, religion is an attempt to create a formula, if you like, or a system that will enable people to feel better and to function more effectively and to be of more value to themselves and the world and all the rest of it. I mean, there's some very interesting studies have come out about the value of religion. It's clear that on the whole, religion can be incredibly valuable. And I mean, even studies of longevity, that, you know, you tend to add 5 years onto your life if you're part of a faith community. I mean, very interesting stuff. And all sorts of meta-analyses of a bunch of different studies and so on. So it seems to be good for your physical health and for your mental health.
So having faith.
Having faith. You know, the Royal College of Psychiatrists have a spirituality, what's it called, special interest group. And they publish some very interesting stuff around that and studies around the value of that. So it seems undoubtedly true that religion can be of huge value, and yet we also see that it's hugely problematic as well, and it's responsible for all sorts of suffering.
So stick to the rules, but if you don't like our rules and we don't like your rules, then we're gonna probably go to war over it.
Yes, we might possibly kill you. I'm so sorry, but
but we don't like your religious rules.
Yes, this will make you feel much better, but if you don't like it, we'll So huge problems around religion. So a sort of softer term is spirituality. I mean, people will say, you know, well, for instance, is Druidry a religion or spirituality? And I'll say, well, it depends. I mean, some people like the term religion, and they like to have a religion and a religious faith. Makes them feel like they're part of something and so on. And it's a positive term.
Yeah.
But then a lot of people don't like the term. It has all sorts of negative connotations, precisely because of the history of much of religion and so on, and all because of their childhood and their upbringing and so on. So that's a negative term for them.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, it makes more sense for them to use a term like spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it seems to me that spirituality has a sort of looser, less defined sort of quality about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to use that myself.
No, absolutely, I do as well. Yeah.
But one of the challenges it presents one with, which is how do you term, do you talk about a spiritual path? Because at some level, my sense is that when you get there's a way in which I don't need a name or a label for my spirituality. I don't actually see myself as a druid, or just as I don't see myself.
You have druidry within
Druidry is one of the spiritual ways that I find really resonant and that I work within.
Yeah.
But I'm deeply moved by Sufism and Sufi poetry and by yoga and all sorts of different approaches,
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism and so on. But we do tend to need labels and words, and so we just have to cope with the limitations around that, I think.
So I suppose what I'm hearing you say is like careful with the identifications around those labels.
Yeah.
So as soon as you think you are one of those things, you're kind of in trouble.
Yes. Yeah. Just really, my sense is to have a really loose identifications around it. Yeah.
I often say to my clients, if you think that I'm a psychotherapist and you're a client, then we're probably a bit in trouble here.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're just going to play those roles out, rather than actually be two people in a room relating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So something, but obviously you still have to be those roles.
Well, you have to. Well, that's exactly an example. You see, where you sort of need the title for the card and for the ad in the paper or whatever it is.
This is what I do.
This is what I do, and what do you do? That's right. Yeah.
So going back to this thing about what motivates you, it's spirituality. It's the thing that's kind of throughout all your work. It's the thing that you're constantly interested in.
Meaning, purpose, spirituality. Yeah.
And do you? It's such a kind of odd question, but do you have a relationship with meaning and purpose? And if so, what is that relationship like?
A relationship.
Can I tell you where I'm sort of coming from?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I think the thing, I suppose what it is that when I set up my kind of psychotherapy practice, I called it emerging purpose, because I was kind of very newly into this idea. Oh yeah, we all have this emerging purpose, and we're not aware of it, and the thing is that we need to find what it is, right?
Yeah.
And then very much kind of like how you're talking about, I suppose, the spiritual path and sort of feeling like it's there's a thing that's always out there to be found. I feel like maybe purpose is kind of the same thing. It's this idea of something that we should be have.
I think it's hugely problematic. It's kind of, but like lots of things that are problematic, it doesn't mean to say one should ban them from one's sort of thought field.
Exactly.
It's quite an interesting and provocative idea. And there's a little book I've written and a sort of online course that I do called Lessons in Magic, which is which is where we look at the idea of purpose and then how you create, really, how you bring stuff into the world, how you tune in to what you really want to be doing with your life, the direction you want to be doing, and then how you make that happen. And that immediately raises the spectre of purpose, as it were. What's my true purpose and all that stuff. And then in one of the lessons, what I do is I drop in a series of little short videos by people like Deepak Chopra and so on, where people are talking about purpose in very different ways, and it can become hugely problematic, as you say, because it becomes, there's the danger of hubris, that somehow I should have a purpose like Mother Teresa had a purpose.
Yeah.
And if I can't access it, it's either because I'm not very evolved and or I'm a waste of space. I mean, maybe, what if the awful truth that there's no purpose to me at all?
Yeah.
Does that mean I have no function in this world?
So again, you can use it to put yourself down.
To beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Or in the contrary way, to inflate yourself. To say my purpose is to bring love into the world and meaning, and
I'm in alignment with my purpose.
And I'm bringing healing to the world through this new cushion that I've developed. So it's a very problematic one, and yet that's the thing. Somewhere in there is a sort of seed. It's a bit like I don't know. The image that comes to me is a sort of an acorn. You don't ask the acorn what its purpose is.
Oh yeah,
but it's
what are you going to be?
Yeah, it's like it's obvious, and it's like I'm just doing it. Is what the acorn, I suspect, would say. It's something about that.
That's nice. Yeah. I suppose. Yeah. So when I asked about I guess when I ask about your relationship to it, that's why I'm interested, because there's something about. I mean, do you ever wake up in the morning and go, "Oh shit, I really don't want to write today," or I don't feel like talking about spiritual values, or being or offering my druid magic, or
Well, two things that occur to me at the relation to purpose and meaning. One is that I don't really think about them that much.
Okay.
Although having said that, they're topics that I think are really central and interesting and provocative and all the rest of it, I don't actually spend much time sort of philosophizing around it or questioning it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I'm writing about a particular thing, I suppose I'm working on the meaning of the meaning of it, but I don't question it at that level. I just sort of get on with it.
Interesting. So much more like the acorn metaphor then.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like going, oh, well, there's an acorn, or you're feeling like the acorn of that idea, and you just let it grow into what it needs to grow into.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I don't, because I think being overly conscious of something, funnily enough, can have a downside to it.
That's interesting. Can you say more about that?
Well, the way everything has its shadow.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So the shadow of the mindfulness, I'm being super conscious here, is that it becomes precious, it kills spontaneity, it becomes controlling, so the ego starts to control rather than just relaxing into being alive, enjoying being alive, and trusting. You may have moments where you deliberately kind of make yourself more mindful, or make a deliberate attempt to experience awe, for instance. But in my experience, the way it works is if it can become so sort of familiar and you can be so relaxed about it that, if I walk down out of your place and go down to the sea and I see the sun shining on the water, I won't have to sort of ask myself to feel, I'll just have the experience of beauty and of enjoyment and of awe without having to be mindful of it. Do you see what I mean?
So trusting the process.
Yeah, just trusting in life that I don't always have to control it or be overly conscious of it, because there's a value in the unconscious, just as there's a value in being asleep as well as in being awake.
Yeah.
And the value in that liminal space of wooziness, where maybe you're not particularly awake and aware, and you're not asleep, but you're sort of half awake. There's a value in all these levels of consciousness, and the risk around the whole enlightenment industry is that you're trying to be super aware all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Let's get really aware.
And
where nothing's happening.
yes.
Because we're so aware.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating, because I think, well, I suppose just from a personal point of view, which is all I can kind of measure this through really is that, I think there's, and maybe that's why I set this thing up, emerging purpose. And it's kind of like, we will find out what a purpose is,
what we're supposed to be doing.
And actually what I found is I got a load of clients who are all in existential crisis.
Yes.
So that's been an interesting journey in itself, because whereas when I first began, I might be thinking, oh no, I've just got people turning up who are like, they want me to help them find their purpose.
Yes.
It's taken sort of quite a long process to kind of go, well, let's just be in that then.
Yeah.
Let's be in an existential. What's it like to be in an existential crisis?
And not to try to get out of it.
And not to try and get out of it.
Do that. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, very fertile place.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Yeah, there was, there's a bit, and I suppose there's, my feeling is that we all go through it.
And also, you see, the thing is, if you at one level, I think, I'm just simply, this is coming straight off the top of my head. I haven't thought this through at all, but maybe see where we go with it. It's like at one level, there's always the existential question. Like the big question is like, what on earth are we doing? I mean, we're sitting here, and at one level the climate is in crisis, and the world is in, there's war, and what the hell is going on? And why are we here anyway? I mean, what are we doing incarnated in these sort of bags of skin and talking to, what's going on? It's like, who am I and why am I here? There's
great questions.
There's these great questions. Like, I think, was it Joseph Campbell or somebody who said, life is like turning up late for a movie, and then not wanting to ask those people next to you what's going on, and then having to leave before the film ends, and when we die,
so making sense of all that, that bit in between.
And I have this fantasy that when I die, I'll look back and say, what was all that about? So what if that question? We can get to that level of questioning of existential crisis or existential questioning at any time.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty hard place to live in all the time.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of really interesting to go there from time to time. But the rest of the time, one has to kind of come down a bit into a kind of more everyday world.
Yeah.
And
sort of chopping wood, fetching water.
Yeah. Yes, and also recognizing one's limitations in the way. It seems to me that the most effective way to be in the world is to be as aware of the big picture as possible and of the existential questions as possible, but also to recognize one's limitations and to work within that. So that if, for instance, at the beginning of this year, I worked on a book on insomnia, approaches to insomnia.
Oh, really?
And when I went to, when I go to that existential place, I think, well, why am I focusing on that? That feels very kind of limited in a way. Why aren't you writing the great work that deals with everything and the meaning of life and all that, rather than just looking at approaches to insomnia, But actually, going into that and spending, I just finished it, a couple of weeks ago, and finishing it, it feels really good. It has it's very limited. It's a book for people who find it hard to sleep.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly valid in itself.
Yeah.
And
specific.
It's very specific.
Yeah.
And the trouble with is I think certainly if I entertain the big questions too much, then I find it hard to function and to be of any use, really.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think what I'm getting from what you're saying is like, if you kind of go out too wide and too big, then actually perhaps that is kind of what can lead you into an existential crisis, because.
And you can get to the wide and big stuff in the little stuff as well.
Uh-huh.
So in other words, say, for instance, in writing a brief history of nakedness, people would say to me, well, how can you write a whole book about nakedness? I mean, what's the deal? I mean, it's like, you either got clothes on or you've got clothes off. How can you write a whole book about it? And I was saying, well, everything is there. Absolutely everything, and so even in writing about insomnia, say, or nakedness, within that topic, there'll be times where you break into the world of sort of eternity and infinity.
Of course.
Touches every possible. Because of course insomnia, you're talking about consciousness.
Yeah.
And what we're really talking about is transition from an everyday state of consciousness to a very altered state of consciousness. So what I did with that book is I just said, look, the psychedelic journey is one where or psychedelic therapy, if you like, is where you help people to transfer from one level to a very different state safely and in a productive way, as it were, and then to come back again. And sleep is the same thing. So let's use the same lens. And then I take that lens that we use in psychedelic therapy of set and setting, medicine and dosage, and just apply that to sleep therapy.
That's really nice. And I suppose it also brings us quite neatly back to the Yoga Nidra.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of got a kind of... Well, it's kind of called sleep yoga, isn't it? Or
yes, and there's and it's hugely helpful. It's hugely helpful for getting people to sleep, actually. So my formulation in this book, it's got two very simple ideas, but I think are really powerful. The first idea is just, look, there's evidence-based sleep science that can help you get to sleep, and basically there are only two. It's sleeping pills or CBT. Sleeping pills not a good idea for all sorts of reasons that I go into in the book, except for short-term issues. And CBT, hugely effective for many people, but problematic in certain respects.
You mean CBD?
No, CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, sort of that's the kind that the doctor will recommend, as it were. But there's a couple of problems. Well, not problems. There are a couple of aspects of CBT that some people find inimical in some way, difficult. So and then you've got all the non-evidence-based stuff, things that people have been using for years, like hypnotherapy and yoga nidra and so on, that don't have the evidence base, but thousands of people swear by. So why not take an integrative approach and say, well, let's mix and match. So that's one idea in the book. And then the second idea is in sleep medicine, people talk about sleep hygiene, which I always think is a really uncomfortable term because it suggests that somehow you've been dirty in your sleep
There's
habits.
good sleep and there's bad sleep.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. I wanted to call the book Dirty Sleep, but then I thought probably not a good book title really. But it does suggest if your doctor or your therapist says, well, I'm going to teach you about sleep hygiene. It feels as if you haven't been quite clean enough in the way you sleep.
Not sleeping in the right way.
Yes. And those are all the ideas around routines for bedtime and blue light from screens.
Oh yeah. Not sitting in bed scrolling through your phone.
And temperature and a whole bunch of physical sort of. It's actually set and setting.
So
it's setting. I'd say it's setting.
Yeah.
And then you have set, which is the cognitive behavioural thing. They talk about cognitive restructuring. But what a clunky term. It's why not talk about set, mindset, and heart? How you think about sleep.
Yeah.
Hugely impactful on actually how you sleep. It's how you think about it. Massively important. So and getting your emotional and mental take or set around sleep right. So set and setting, and then you get to medicine. Well, what am I going to take? So I list 13. I go into detail around 13 ways, and yoga nidra is one of them.
Right.
So there's CBT and hypnotherapy and progressive muscle relaxation and various things, and then one of them is yoga nidra, which was your question. And what was your question? I've forgotten.
Well, my question. I don't really know actually what my question was. It was more of an observation that is another one of your kind of
non-expert
tools.
Specialities.
But I'm kind of fascinated in myself because I sort of had a brief period of and I'd kind of like to do it again, but it's of of this meditating in this way where you kind of lie down, you put an eye cushion on, perhaps if you want to, you pull a blanket over, you get seriously comfortable, and then you can either listen to a kind of a guided visualization through it. And it's usually kind of going right through in detail through your body, isn't it? And through your bones and your...
The two particular techniques it uses is, I mean, as you say, for a start, you're lying down. You know, we're so used to having to sort of sit up with an upright spine and all that. You know, that's right. So you lie down, you get as comfy as possible, and then you don't have to do anything. Unlike a lot of meditations where you're repeating a mantra or you're engaging in some kind of mental work or even non-work, if you see what I mean. It's still, you have to do something. Whereas with yoga nidra, you don't do anything. You just listen to somebody's voice, which might be on a YouTube thing or a recording or a person physically present with you.
Yes.
And so the great thing is you just completely surrender to that voice. And you don't even have to follow it. That's a thing. I mean, you can just let go so totally. You're not even following the instructions, which is an interesting experience in itself.
Absolutely.
But if you follow the instructions, the two techniques they're using that really help to shift your consciousness is one is a pilgrimage around the body. And it just draws your attention to different points around your body. And there's a whole bunch of different routes you can take, which is what you learn when you learn yoga teacher training. You know, you do yoga nidra teacher training. And so I learned from a wonderful couple who in Stroud, and you take these routes through the body, and often, particularly for me, certainly, I think a lot of people, if you're doing it in the afternoon or the evening, you're off. You basically fall asleep. If you do it in the evening or after a coffee, and you don't fall asleep, you go incredibly deep. It's like this really deep meditation. So it's the pilgrimage, the distinctive feature of yoga nidra is that pilgrimage around the body.
I love that. The pilgrimage.
I know, it's beautiful, and you can
beautiful.
you can make lovely variations on it. Like you can imagine going to shrines and lighting a candle. So you move your awareness to your shoulder, and and you're lighting a candle at this shrine, and then you move down to your elbow, and then to your wrists, and then to your fingers, and then all around the body, and then the other feature is that you become aware of opposites. So you imagine, for instance, that you're high up on a mountain, and then you imagine you're low down in a valley, or that you're very hot and then you're very cold. You're sitting at the North Pole, and then you're sitting around a fire. And there's something about this. That comes from Tantra. This particular technique.
Tension of opposites.
And then you see if you can hold the opposites. Is there some way in which you can experience both at the same time, feeling as light as a feather and as heavy as a stone? And that seems to effect change. It's like your rational mind gives up at that point. It's like, I can't do this, and you go to another level with it.
So again, it's like we're going to get somewhere with this. It's it kind of happens to you throughout the kind of practice. It's I remember also this sort of sense of, with the tension of opposites thing. Really helpful, because there was kind of some things in my life that gave me produced anxiety. So it was kind of, the invitation was like, okay, we'll bring on the feeling in your body that brings that anxiety on, and feel the anxiety. And then what's the opposite to that? It's kind of this really relaxed, let go, kind of in the flow space, and then play between those two opposites. And then what I noticed was that when in my conscious waking life, when that anxiety came on, that I naturally wanted to go to the opposite as well.
That had been sort of awakened in you and enlivened in your consciousness, so you could see it's a bit like, perhaps there's some similarity with the disidentification exercise
in psychosynthesis.
Exactly. And the combination of the pilgrimage and the opposites, working with the opposites, makes it very special, I think. And in fact, it can become a spiritual, the one methodology you use in your spiritual life, or the one way that you find is helpful for getting to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certainly.
I love an afternoon nap.
Yeah.
I must say.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's not, it's not a kind of fixed thing, but it's but if there's time and I've got space, it's one of the most enjoyable things ever.
How long do you sleep for?
Well, probably no more than 40 minutes. I wonder if that's the 40 winks thing.
Right. Well, that's interesting. You should say that, because and we're all different, which is why one has to be so careful with all of this.
Yeah.
But just generally, the sort of the ideas around that are that you have different stages of sleep. Essentially, you have light sleep and deep sleep, and then they're broken up into like 4 or 5 phases, depending on how you understand. But if you have a nap, that usually after about 30 minutes, you tend to go into deep sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And if you sleep longer than 30 minutes, it can be problematic. So for a lot of people, a 40-minute nap would be really problematic.
It's a bit groggy when you wake up.
You wake up.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. There's a part of you that just wants to go on sleeping.
Yeah,
Another part doesn't want to wake up, nor rest it.
Yeah.
So less than half an hour, and usually around 20 minutes.
A little 20-minuter,
A 20-minuter means you've gone into light sleep, but you haven't dropped down too far. And in fact, I've been experimenting with 8-minute naps.
No way.
Yeah, I've got a machine. I acted as a consultant for this company called Morpheus, which do a sophrology machine.
Oh, I think you might have brought that to Cayman Bond.
I did.
It's like a little ball thing.
Yes, it looks like a lithiometer or whatever it's called from the Golden Compass. That's right. That's right.
An amazing contraption.
Yeah, a lovely little contraption.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to do some work with them, and so I got a couple of free samples, and I've been using it over the last few months on the 8-minute setting, which I had never explored before. I just hadn't got round to it. And I find that is absolutely fabulous. It suits me down to the ground right now.
Like a power nap.
A power nap. And it's just 8 minutes, guides me in and then pulls me out after 8 minutes.
So good.
Yeah.
I mean, I can kind of relate in terms of having sat down in the afternoon maybe to read a book and just kind of got a kind of, one paragraph in and felt the eyelids going and then and then just kind of dropping, but then
pulling out
again quite quickly,
Well, that's another kind altogether.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's a micro nap, micro sleep, and
I think it works.
It does. Salvador Dali made it popular because he said he was taught by Capuchin monks, and what he would do is he'd put a metal plate on the floor, and would sit with a spoon in his hand. Or fork, and would allow himself to do exactly that, just to nod off over to him. And then, of course, his hand would relax, the spoon would clatter on the plate, and it would wake him up. So it would literally just be for a few seconds. and that's something, that some people find really refreshing as well.
Yeah, I must say that's happened. I've woken up from that and kind of felt like, I feel good. I feel refreshed.
Refreshed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a real skill to develop. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've got a little bit of time left. That's all right.
Yeah.
I just want to. I sort of feel like. I mean, we could talk about so many different things, of course.
Yeah.
But I sort of feel like it would be remiss to not mention that you've got a new book coming out. Out already?
Well, the book is called The Gift of the Night.
Yeah.
And it's about approaches to insomnia, combining sleep science and spirituality. Alternative approaches and mainstream evidence-based approaches.
Yeah.
It's not coming out till October though.
Right.
Next year.
Oh, I see. So the other book that you were mentioning to me about the Seven Valleys, that's not.
Oh, that came out like over a year ago.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm so
Yeah,
behind
that's right.
my
Yeah.
research.
Yeah. That came out a while ago. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and that is a hybrid of it's a book or booklet really, and a online program that's essentially 2 audio tracks of which I think you've listened to.
I've
Haven't
listened
you?
to it, yeah. We did, again, in Came Upon, I think we were
Yeah,
kind of like, beta testing on
yes,
us.
that's right. And then I did a seminar for the Kubler-Ross Foundation,
Uh-huh.
and it's based on the story of the 7 valleys, which you find in the Sufi tradition, and yes, that's been out for about a year or so.
Oh, great. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll put a link to that in the...
Yes,
in
too.
the show
Yeah,
notes.
yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose, what next for you then?
Well, you've been talking about purpose and meaning, and
Mm-hmm.
what one does in one's life,
Yeah.
and you mentioned that I'd done a lot of things,
Yeah.
and the tension for me, or the conundrum, or what's the right word, the sort of maybe we have in our lives, or maybe sometimes we have a particular question or issue that's like it's not a problem, it's a challenge, and I can't get the word for it really. The question for me has been precisely that.
What next?
Well, no, is that I'm interested in lots of things,
Ah.
and I can often, in the past, I've often felt scattered, like like, what are you doing? You're training in yoga and nidra teacher training, but you've already written a course in Druidry, and you've written a book about nakedness. It's like, what are you doing? It's like you're going all over the place. But actually, I'm not. I've realised that I'm not. I mean, sometimes it's certainly felt that way.
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit disparate, rather
A bit
than
disparate,
not
yes,
really.
and it's that tension between the generalist and the specialist. So I used to beat myself up for not being a specialist. I used to think, why didn't I, when I took my degree in psychology, why didn't I just then do a master's and then do a doctorate and then specialize in a particular area like depression or insomnia or whatever, and focus on that? Instead, I find that I've written, all these books and done these different things and all the rest of it. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And a couple of things helped me in that. I used to feel that for a number of years. I remember once I was in a New York bookshop and I saw this book saying, what is it? It's a very clever title. It's something like How to Fall Apart Without Breaking Down, or something like that. It wasn't quite that, but it was like that sort of play on words.
Yeah.
I came across a book by a psychologist who talked about people like me. I think she called them scatterers, people who are scattered. And it's sort of basically the message goes, do you find you're interested in loads of stuff? Do you find yourself, looking in all sorts of directions and not wishing you were a specialist in one, but actually, relax. That's who you are.
Oh.
It's okay.
Oh, what a relief to hear you say this, Philip. Oh my God.
And exactly, it was a relief. It's like I didn't even need to read her book. It was just this idea.
You just needed it named.
I just needed it named. It's okay, relax. That some people are specialists and some people are generalists.
Oh.
And I started talking to people about that.
Yeah.
And people were saying, yeah, I feel the same way. Or, I've always felt that you, Philip, you're interested in lots of things. And that's lovely. I love that. It's not like a problem.
No.
It's great. And so I started to accept that part of me. And to think, no, this isn't a burden. This is a gift.
How lovely.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that was a real turnaround for me. That was about 10 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
So up until 60 or 55 years old, I every so often would beat myself up for being scattered or a generalist. Then I reframed that and saw that it was a gift. This is just who I am, And it enables me, I think, and it enables generalists. What generalists can do is they can make connections, they can see patterns, and they have a different perspective. And if you talk to a specialist, I really respect specialists. Obviously, they know they've gone into, but if you talk to them outside their field, it's like they're completely naive around all sorts of issues.
They don't see the connections.
No, well, because they haven't had the time, because they've been specialising for years in this one field.
Yeah.
And they haven't, taken it. If you take sleep as an example, it's like, in a way, I feel that now I could say that I was a specialist in sleep. I think I probably know more about sleep than most people.
Because you became a student of it.
Well, I became a student of it, and what I realised is that the issue with sleep, unlike many issues in the mental health field, mental and physical health field, is fairly delimited. It's fairly limited and contained. You know, the way with issues like, say, depression or PTSD or schizophrenia or whatever, they're vast. I mean, you could spend your whole professional life in that one field, attending conferences every year about depression, reading all the new theories that are coming out, and all the disagreements that exist between theoreticians and so on, different schools, developing your own favourite approach, and then finding there's a better one somewhere else, and then retraining in that, and that's like a lifetime's work, and still you wouldn't really. And also, the success rate or your ability to affect change is fairly limited within those fields, as we know. What I discovered with insomnia is it's a particular issue. If you just spend a year reading a whole bunch of books about sleep, learning, maybe I did a training in CBT for sleep, for insomnia, CBTI it's called. Right. Working with different modalities and all the rest of it. You can have a pretty good handle on it, and you can know quite a lot about the field. It's very specific. There isn't much disagreement within the field of sleep science. And actually, you can affect a lot of change. You can really help people. I mean, CBTI has a 70% success rate. That's really high, So
what does the I stand for in CBTI?
Insomnia. CBT4 insomnia. So you can, in a way, become a sort of specialist in that field, But then I ask myself, and this is where I know I'm a generalist. I think, am I becoming a specialist finally? And then I ask myself, would you like to remain a sleep specialist? Why don't stay here? Advertise yourself as a sleep therapist. Only see clients who have sleep problems.
No.
Is the answer. No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. I really, really resonate with you,
Yeah.
I mean, for 20 years, I was an actor. And what's great about being as an actor is that you actually have to do every other job in the world while you're waiting to be an actor. Right? So it's kind of brilliant. You can do all this work brilliantly committed, because you know that at some point you're going to get a job.
It's not lasting forever.
It's not going to last forever.
And you're also acting. I remember having a meal in Brighton, and it wasn't you, it was somebody else, but there was a waiter who was the perfect waiter.
Yes.
And I said, "Are you an actor?" And he said, "Yes." "How could you tell?" And I said, "Well, it's like you're acting being a waiter. I mean, you're being the perfect waiter." Like most waiters aren't like that.
I got one of my biggest breaks when I was a waiter at a restaurant. And it was one of the most happiest times of my life, because I was doing exactly that. I was like, I can be the best waiter. I will act being a waiter, and I will get the big tips. Because I will be the best waiter you've ever had.
That's it.
I was kind of disappointed when I got an acting role, because I had to go and leave it and do something else. But it's interesting, because it's it's the kind of area we're talking really is like, again, a generalist. You could say artist, all right? Because when is a piece of art ever finished? And I heard a good friend of mine sort of said, and I'm not sure whether this was a quote from someone or whatever, but he sort of said, an artist knows when a piece of work is finished because they start thinking about the next piece, and they get bored of that one and they want to move on. So it's not necessarily finished, but the attention has moved to the next thing.
And knowing when to let go, and just letting go of it and giving that.
So it's such a lovely, I mean, I feel so much relief just talking to you about that, because I feel like I'm a generalist. what right have I got to start a podcast?
Yes, that's right.
I can listen to a lot of podcasts, and people are very, very professional, and that's their thing, and they
Yeah.
do very great podcasts.
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, I'm just doing a podcast because I'm kind of interested in talking to some really interesting people about what makes them tick, and that interests me.
Absolutely, and the term amateur,
Yeah.
it comes from the word love.
Does it?
Amor. The
Amor.
Latin for love.
Yeah.
So an amateur is somebody who absolutely loves this thing. We tend to use it as a pejorative term.
yeah.
But actually, it's really positive. I'm a lover of this. I'm an amateur.
Really interesting. Yeah. So and there's the sort of image that comes as well as like a kind of bee pollinating, and actually if you're in the garden and going around all the flowers and kind of having and seeing all the different types of flowers, then what a wonderful life.
Well, there's that lovely saying from the Dzogchen Tantra, which goes, what is it? Seek. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember it. Go wherever you please. Seek, go, like a bee seeking nectar from many flowers. Roam as you please, like a lion, free of all fear.
Yeah.
And that's a lovely guiding principle, I think.
I really think that too, and I think obviously we live in this world where we're kind of indoctrinated to think you go to work, excuse me, go to work, do your thing, you have to earn money, so choose your thing and do this thing, and obviously a lot of people in the world have to feel that that's their kind of they're kind of imprisoned to that. But it's interesting. I've always had this sense that if you go looking for the thing that's going to make you money, you kind of find money, and you don't necessarily find the nectar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's always this balance where it's a bit like, if I do the thing that I love, eventually maybe it'll become monetized and it'll help me live, or I'll just find the person that I need that will get the next opportunity will come along and the next whatever.
Well, I know, and the tricky thing with these ideas is, of course, the opposite is always true too.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the classic one, do what you love and the money will follow, which I think is really true at one level. But also, I remember somebody saying once on some sort of interview or something, or somebody saying to me or saying, "I've been doing what I love for years, and the money has never followed." So one always has to bear that in mind too.
Yeah,
but
how to get by in the world with as well.
But I think generally the principle, that the most of the world seems to work with you focus on what you, have, do, be. So you go, I've got to have, the fast car and the beautiful home and the gorgeous wife and all the rest of it. So what I need to do is make a whole bunch of money, and then I can be happy.
Yeah,
and actually to flip it around and to say, focus on it, being happy, being contented, feeling full of gratitude and awe and all the rest of it. Start there, and then from that place, decide on what you want to do. And the having stuff tends to sort itself out. Doesn't always, but tends to sort itself out.
But I suppose if you're already doing it from that point of view,
yes, it's not so important for a start.
It's not so important. Those things are the illusion or things that can make you happy.
Yeah, you just reprioritize it. So you put being at the heart of, or the number one priority rather than having.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interestingly then, so if I was to ask you what next, it's like, well, who knows?
Well, exactly. I mean, the what next thing is, for years, Stephanie and I would do a process where we would look at the end of every year. We would spend an evening in a lovely sort of informal way, just looking back on the previous year, which is a great thing to do. And you look through your photos and you look through the diary and you say, oh yes, I saw Greg back then, and so came over and we went there, and some stuff you forget, and just sort of digesting the year and looking back. And in gratitude and contentment and so on, and learning, and then looking about what one wanted to achieve that year. Oh yes, we planned to do that, but we never got round to it. But we did do that. We did that, and so on. And then the next evening, what we would do is we would plan the year ahead. So this would be the beginning of January. We'd say, okay, And we got very organised about it. So it's like, what do we want to do at the practical level, at the social level, at the cultural level, and at the spiritual level.
Nice.
So we did that for years. And then about 4 years ago, I don't know, we got busy around that time. And at some point I said to Steph, should we try just not doing it? Should we try not planning the year ahead? And ever since we don't and actually it's been fabulous. All sorts of wonderful things
Amazing
have happened.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we've all that whole Synthesis Institute work and the connectedness all that came completely out of the blue, left field. I had no idea that wasn't planned.
Are you still doing some work for Synthesis?
Yeah. I just got back from Holland a few days ago.
So what are you up to with them?
I'm on the retreat team now.
Are you?
So I went through, there was the connectedness program that you and I did for about a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, with Ros Watts kind of leading it.
That's right.
Yeah. So it was kind of when the pandemic hit, there was a kind of online group that met every couple of weeks.
From the Imperial College, people in the clinical trial.
That's right.
And we sort of supported them over that year. And about 6 to 9 months into that, they had me doing Druid ceremonies online for the community. And then that sort of fell away as the organisation grew, and sort of somebody forgot to send an email or something, and that just sort of grew. And then what happened was they asked me to be a learning mentor because they started a psychedelic practitioner training over that was ongoing, and they split students into pods.
Yeah.
And so they wanted learning mentors for the pod. So I had a pod, and I accompanied them over
fantastic
15 months, I think it was, or 13 months. No, 15, I think, or 18. And then we all met in the Netherlands this summer. 60 people and like 40 staff. I mean, there were 80. I don't know. There were about 80 or 100 of us. In this place for 2 weeks. It was absolutely incredible. The participants were there 10 days, and we were top to tail.
Wow!
Incredible in that heat wave.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
So if you'd sat down at the beginning of the year and said, "Yeah, this is what I'll be doing this year," you might have kind of missed that opportunity.
The whole year, everything that's happened this year.
Yeah.
My mum died in December last year, and I decided I went to Ireland for 2 months just because it had been quite hard, and I just needed a break. And when I was in Ireland, I decided to write the book on insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
And but I hadn't planned. I suppose I'd half planned to do. I knew I was going to do it. I've had it cooking for about 4 years. Most of the books I've done are often 10-year projects. You get an idea and you cook it and you gather. You sort of have a file, and anything interesting that comes along, you drop it into the file. I drop it into, and then I talk to people about it, and then it cooks away.
Nice.
I mean, the Nakedness book took 10 years.
Yeah.
I've been working on a book on Jainism for about 10 years, 12 years now.
Oh, that's so interesting. Again, because it's a little bit like, well, if you think about mycelium and mushrooms, the mycelium's always there under the ground doing its work, and every now and then a mushroom pops up.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's kind of what you're saying is like, because you can kind of see people in the cultural, when they come through into the public eye, it's like, it looks like, oh, you've just done this thing, and that must have you just did it.
Yeah.
But actually what you're saying is, no, there's 10 years of generalism, or 10 years of popping that thing in that file and that thing in that file, my interests here and here. Oh, and look, the mushroom comes out, here's the book.
That's right, yes. Virtually all the books I've done have actually been processes that have taken years and years and years, because actually writing doesn't take that long. I mean, the first book I wrote on Druidry, I wrote it in a frenzy in 3 weeks.
What was that? What was that called? Not the Druid's Way.
It was called the Elements of the Druid Tradition, and then I rewrote it a number of years later as Druid Mysteries. And but of course, at that time, I don't know, I was 40 or something like that, and I'd been doing it for 20 years or something like that. So the actual physical writing isn't the problem. Never the problem, for me anyway. It's the material.
Yeah. So your life is the research
and the inspiration and the ideas and the insights you get and so on. So if I hadn't done the work with synthesis and in the psychedelic therapy field, I wouldn't have had the insight for the insomnia book. So the insomnia book had been cooking, but I needed that ingredient, that particular take. Oh, I know. Let's stop talking about cognitive restructuring and sleep hygiene. Let's talk about set and setting.
Beautiful.
You know, and it's
Beautiful.
so simple. It's like a no-brainer, really, isn't it? And as soon as you say it, it's like, oh yeah, it's obvious and so simple. But nobody else has said it, as far as I'm aware.
No.
And so I, put it in the book.
And I wonder what the integration aspect is as well, because there must be a sense that that's connected as well with sleep.
Yes.
Or insomnia.
One of the things I do is that all the attention gets put on getting you to sleep, but there's the whole issue of waking up and how you wake up and what, how you go into your day and all the rest of it. So that's actually how I end the book. With the section on waking up. Which
is, as we know, the sort of kind of one of the most important aspects of the psychedelic therapy is integration.
Exactly.
Because we can all go and take these substances and sit on top of mountains and have
great revelations.
But if we don't do anything with that, then we're back down at the bottom of the mountain wondering what
was
happened.
That all about? Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Greg. Really a pleasure to have a good old chat with you.
Yeah, and I hope you have a wonderful Christmas.
Thank you.
And don't make any plans for the new year.
Yes, that's right.
And I'll see you around.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Cheers. So, there we go. What a lovely conversation. Well, I enjoyed it anyway. And I think, one of the things that I found really, really useful, and you can probably tell by my reaction, was when Philip and I were talking about when Philip was talking about being a generalist. And that was such a relief for me. I found that such a relieving concept because there's this idea, in society, and like you find your purpose and your passion, and you sort of stick to it, and you stay on that path, and you go into it, and that's great if that's how you kind of what keeps your kind of passion alive. However, I've noticed in my life, and I don't know, maybe some of you guys have noticed this, it's life sometimes feel a little bit more like being a kind of bee, or and kind of going around and pollinating different flowers. And I find that concept so relieving and interesting, because what it does is it sort of gives us permission to sort of follow our passion and follow our interests. And and that's what I found in my life. I love there's lots of different aspects. I love music. I love to play music and write music, but sometimes I don't. And other times I really love getting into photography, and it's all about photography. And I love training. I love training to become a therapist. And then, sometimes at the moment I'm dipping back into doing a little bit of acting, because that kind of brings that aliveness. And there's something about that, is being able to give yourself permission to sort of walk into these different areas of life. And especially if you sort of feel like you want a little bit of challenge, or you want to be just a little bit out of your depth, then it's quite nice to have different passions and hobbies and ways of thinking about life. So that was the thing that really stuck out in that conversation, has really stayed with me, is the sort of idea around being a generalist, and that being a kind of positive thing. So thank you to Philip. It was so nice of you to come along. So nice of him to come along and share his thoughts with us. And I'm really looking forward to next podcast episode. I'll be interviewing a friend of mine called Anne Matthey, and we're going to be talking about kind of spiritual practices and models and kind of having a look at that whole area, really, the transpersonal, and had a really great conversation with Anne. So that'll be coming up at some point in the future. And yeah, and I just wanted to also thank a big thank you to Julian Humphreys, who supplied the music for this podcast. You would have heard parts of it at the beginning for the introduction, and you're going to hear a little bit of it now for the outro. And I may have even put some parts of it throughout the episode as well. So thanks to Julian for that. And thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.